See. Hello, hello, hello. I'm so happy to be with you guys again. My topic today, for those of you who might not have seen it, is Synchrodestiny. And this is among my very, very favorite metaphysical topics going because it is among the most applicable, one of the most immediately applicable spiritual premises and principles that I've ever engaged. And since the day I learned about it, which was in my mid-30s, I have been practicing it ever since. And the credit for the term synchrodestiny goes to Deepak Chopra. Synchronicities can become among the most powerful communication pathways in spirit. Synchronicities can grow to miraculous proportions and involve innumerable numbers of people. So how many of you have read or heard of Synchrodestiny through Deepak Chopra? Anybody? Just a few people? So I just want to show you the book, just so that this is what the book looks like. And also, I actually first engaged through a set of CDs that he did, and the CDs are not him reading the book. If you ever get a chance to get your hands on a set of CDs called Synchrodestiny, it by Nightingale Conant, it's 12 hours of him teaching how you do this. It's extremely powerful. So I want today to tell you the story of how I moved from being a part-time practitioner to being a full-time practitioner and how I got here. It happened. It was all one huge wave of transformation that came through my life. It's a different story than the printed story. There's a printed story in the back, and it's a different story of Synchrodestiny. I just wanted to give you guys many different views of how this can unfold and what it can turn into. So the story of my getting here starts with the fact that I worked for Continental Airlines before they became United. I worked for Continental for 22 years. And at the time, I loved my job. And I believed I would stay with the airline and gradually move from being full-time with them to being part-time. And then as I did that, I would ramp up my work as a practitioner. And I would become full-time as a practitioner. And I saw it as a beautiful balance that I would just keep. And then when 9/11 happened, a whole lot changed energetically for the airline industry, as I'm sure you guys can imagine. And I would have hung in there with it because, certainly that was not the airline's fault. And if anything, consciousness is needed to be applied to that whole situation. But what happened is that I worked in the rate department, and there came a day when I realized that everything was changing so fast and so much, I never knew if I was giving somebody accurate information. And I could not live with that because it just grated on my integrity every call I took. I didn't know if what I was saying was actually going to be true for somebody. And so I turned to Spirit and I said, wow, the vision that I had isn't going to work. We have to do something about this because I am out of alignment and I really need to take care of this. And so I started working had no idea how Spirit would move me from the full-time paycheck that I got with the airline into being able to ramp up what I did as a practitioner to the point where I would be able to retire. But I knew I had to do it. And so started working with Spirit, and it took 2 years. And one of the things that I did is everybody that retired early, they would send cards around, and I would sign the card. I'd say, hold the door open for me. And then what happened is I knew that I had to get the feeling of what that would be. And so I lined myself up 3 days in a row, and I intentionally booked those days, 8 hours a day or more, doing practitioner work, because I said I need to get the feeling of what this manifestation is going to be like. And on the third day, last appointment, it was miles away from where I lived, so I had a lot of contemplative, meditative time out in the country to drive back to my house. I got in my car to drive home, and I was jacked. I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. And I said, yes, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And very rarely does this happen, but I swear I actually did hear a direct response, and I didn't hear it out loud. I heard it in my head, but it was very clear. I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I heard, will you trust me no matter what it looks like? And I was riding so high, I didn't even think. I just said yes. Okay? Now, that just opened up all kinds of an energetic portal. And the next thing that happened, and it was actually a few months later, but it was all working together. My husband worked for Six Flags Astroworld in Texas, in Houston, Texas. And Six Flags are really big theme parks, and he was in management for them. And one of the first synchronicities, and as you guys are listening to this, I meant to preface this. I'll get back to what I'm saying in just a moment. This is very important. You're going to hear me mentioning different symbols, different things that I did. It's not about specifically what the symbols are or specifically what I did. This journey is extremely unique to each one of you, okay? One of the things you can do as you get on board with what I'm talking about here is you can choose symbols that mean things to you, and you can create an agreement with Spirit. When I see that symbol, I'm going to know something's up, kind of thing. Okay? That's one of the ways that you can intentionally set forth a synchronistic deal on your own just by knowing what your symbols and so forth are. Okay? So the first thing that happened is, I don't know if you remember, but one of the hurricanes, it was Rita or the one before that, the first big one that hit New Orleans, and Katrina. Okay, so the deal is that the dome, the Astrodome in Houston, is in the same parking lot as the parking lot for my husband's job, Astro World. Okay? Big, huge parking lot, but it's the same property. Okay? And so the hurricane comes in, huge wave of energy. All those people, they initially went to their dome, but then their dome wouldn't hold up, and they transferred all those people into Astroworld in Houston. Okay? Scads and scads of buses, and my husband was working that day. And on that day, his job sent an email to all of their managers saying, on the 30th of October, we're closing, and no one has a job. And my husband came home and told me that. And on a human level, I was like, you have got to be kidding me. They picked that day with all of those homeless, people to tell you that you're not going to have a job? But, see, and this is one of the things about Synchrodestiny. When you're watching synchronicities, okay, they can start with the smallest thing, okay? But the more unusual it is, the more extraordinary, when you see something, even if you haven't seen anything synchronistic yet, if you see something that really strikes you as, wow, that's really different, when do you ever see that? Stop and notice it and say, I'm watching. I see you. And so my husband came home and told me that they did that on that day, and I was like, well, something is coming down the pike, because what are the chances of that happening? And so life went on, and they closed the park, and my husband was one of the last people on that property. And when they transferred his manager up here, and when they transferred him, my husband's job was not available. My husband was the manager of games and retail, and his job was being held by somebody, a woman. And so 3 days after everything was cleared off the lot at Six Flags Astroworld in Houston, the woman who had my husband's job up here, she was pregnant. And when when she found out she was pregnant, she told them she would take her 6 weeks leave. But what happens to many, many, many women after they have their baby, and 6 weeks later they have to say, oh, I'm going to take the baby to daycare? Can you imagine what might have happened? Thank you. She decided she wasn't going to go back. And this is happening in March, okay? And the theme park industry, they gear up for the summer in March. And so having this key person fall out was the last thing that they had in mind. Now, but in our world, this is Spirit's, thing. Because his manager went to them and said, now, company policy was you have to, put it out there and go through the whole, give people a chance and all this stuff. He went to him privately, his boss did, and he said, please, please don't put us through that. I got the guy. You just got to let me know if I can tell him that he can definitely have this job. We work together. It'll be a very cool thing. And they said, okay, which was extraordinary that they trusted him with that. So my husband, my husband's boss, calls him up out of the blue. This is, a few months after the thing happened, like in October, the Katrina, and then this happened in March. And he says, Vernon, I got your job. It's in Louisville, Kentucky. You can have it hat in hand without having to even interview, but you got to be here in 5 days. Okay, now, this is the next thing about how this works, okay? And none of these are overgeneralized, you guys. I'm just throwing stuff out there, and you try them on and see how they fit for you. But one of the things I've learned is that the universe loves very precious stillness and deep, deep compassion. Well, generally, stillness, that's where everything starts. But once things are in motion, the times of stillness are called for when something needs to be healed. But when something is on the leading edge, the paradox to that is the universe also loves speed. When all things are lined up and the next level of the highest good is getting ready to pop, when it's before you, if you can, say yes. And it's like, this was like we were in school because, we had 5 days. We were going to have to be quick. Now, I still work for the airline. We own a house. There's all this stuff. But I knew, because of the extraordinary nature of what had been happening, and I've been practicing this all this time, I knew there was much more going on than practical details would necessitate. And I told him, I said, if you want to keep working in this industry and you want to go back and work for Andy, grab the brass ring and just say yes. And the only thing we had to do, and this is the next extraordinary piece of this, is that I couldn't just quit. If I just quit, I would lose my flight benefits. And that's the major thing that comes with working for an airline for like a lifetime, is you retire with flight benefits. And I was going to need those if we were going to be leaving Houston, because we had been there for 22 years, and plus our family was all over the nation. So I said, oh my God, I have 5 days. And so I started working and just really praying, trusting. And I put out an email to the regional director for my department, and he knew me, but not really well. And so I said, you probably are aware of what's happening at Six Flags because of that level of management. I figured, companies kind of probably know what's going on at that level. I said, I know you guys don't usually say if there's going to be an early out from the airline because they don't want you to know in advance. Because if you know in advance, then you'll start doing things that they're not ready for you to do. I said, I swear to God, if you will tell me this, I will not breathe it to a single soul, but this is what's happening. We have 5 days. Is there going to be an early out? And he got back to me within 12 hours. I was in shock. The email went straight through to his BlackBerry, and he did recognize me, and he just said, go for it. The early out is coming in 6 weeks. I would never have known. And so, oh my God. And now I got chills still telling you guys about this, because 2 years have been working on show me the way, show me the way, show me the way. And now I knew when I heard that voice, it said, will you trust me no matter what? Because if I had seen a crystal ball and it had said, your husband's whole, because it was a breakup of a family. When they took that park down and all those employees, they couldn't work anymore. I mean, it broke their hearts. And absolutely, if I had known that was going to be the way, I would never have signed on. And so all of a sudden, I was like, oh my God, this is what that voice was. Will you trust me no matter what? So I called Vernon. I said, you're not going to believe this. I said, we're going to Kentucky because the early out's coming in 6 weeks. And so then my date of getting here was 6 months later, but that was a really good thing because I had to sell my house. So my husband came up here in March. This is in March of 2006, and then I got here in September, okay? So the pieces of this that are the most important is what's happening is that the spirit of which we know we're all one, the spirit of first cause, is pure consciousness and doesn't even move. Okay, that's the preciousness of that stillness. Once something is moving, then you have speed and distance, then you have all kinds of comparative stuff that is going on, and the field that is between the pure stillness and manifest form, insofar as we know, and there's probably even more, but I'm talking about from my experience of what I currently understand, the quantum field is between the two. Synchronicity that builds into synchrodestiny is a principle that is moving through the quantum field, okay? And here's the thing, is that the intelligence of spirit that is pure potential, it's throwing potentials out there all the time. But we as co-creators have free will, which ones we uptake and what level we uptake them at, okay? And so the first thing is to be aware that you are surrounded by the potential for the extraordinary every day you live. It's in the field, okay? And when you make an agreement that these particular kinds of symbols, for some people there's certain birds, if they see a certain bird, or if they see their animal totem, then they know something's up. Well, if you make these kind of commitments with Spirit loves that stuff, because then Spirit's like, okay, let me just, I know for sure this one will work, kind of thing. One of the things I did that with is fortune cookies, okay? The Oh God movies. There's Oh God, book 1, book 2, and book 3. And in book 2, God approaches a child in a Chinese restaurant. And he puts in her fortune cookie, come meet God in the lobby. Well, I saw that, and I was like, well, hot damn, if that's not plain English, I'm up for this. And so I said, anytime, don't worry about hitting me over the head. Anytime you need to get a message through to me, put it in a fortune cookie. I'm good. And not every time. Now, it's not like every time I read a fortune cookie, but there's a feeling that comes with it. And there has been probably by now at least 10 times in my life that I have been given a heads up by something that came in a fortune cookie. And one of them was, before I met my husband of today, Vernon, he's the Six Flags guy. Before I met him, I was consciously working on attracting my perfect right mate. And I got a fortune cookie one day that said, consolidate your interests while the lights are active. Now, what kind of a fortune cookie is that? And I read that thing, and I checked in, and I got that feeling, and I said, ooh, I don't know, because the whole while the lights are active part was a little ominous, but I put it in my pocket, and I said, I know this is one of these. And sure enough, as it turned out to be a whole nother story, but about 6 months later or so, I did meet my husband of today, and ultimately my mother made her transition 6 weeks after we were married. And I kept that piece of paper, and at the time when I needed to tell my husband, I'm going to be a much happier woman if I marry you before my mother dies, I said, I know, we don't know yet for sure if we're going to get married, but if you will trust me that I'm not trying to pigeonhole you, we need to see if we can live together. We need to do this now. If we do it now and it works, we're going to be good. And we can do this before my mom dies. And he did, trust me. And it's I was able to show him. I said, this is going on, and I got this fortune cookie. Is that my timing? Okay. So let me just wrap this up with some of the most important things. On a temporal level, it's not about whether it looks good or bad. If there is something happening from a higher source, and because you've been watching synchronicities build, the key is it's like a back and forth dance, sort of like a table tennis. The quantum field sends a volley, and then it's what we do back with it. How far can we go? And then the next thing happens. Okay? So the key is when you know that something is moving, make the highest possible and best meaning of it you possibly can, no matter what it looks like. Okay, like my having to trust, well, they just wiped my husband's job out, but no, this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to us. Okay? And so that's one thing. And the other thing is, sometimes metaphysically, we all know that when there's a planted seed, we need to nest on it. And in Scripture, that's what the Scripture lends to in my understanding and application, where it says, be careful of casting pearls before swine. You don't want to take your most precious thing that is just starting and throw it out there arbitrarily where people can take it away from you or disempower it. Okay? But this synchronicity thing, it's, again, a paradoxical flip on that, because when you share something synchronistic, that's part of what gets more people involved, and then more and more people are getting into this whole synchrodestiny thing, because like right here, right now, here I am telling you this story and leaving you with these stories. Who knows which of these symbols you're going to remember in your mind, and then you're going to say, wow, she talked about that in that story. Maybe I should watch that too. And what you do, see, that's part of the communication, is when you catch a synchronicity, which can be the simplest little thing, and if you call it a coincidence, it's not going to catch fire. But if you call it a synchronicity and then you say, okay, I see you, what's next? Then the universe volleys back. And then once you have a story to tell, you pass it on to a group like this, and now everybody's watching. Okay, what's going to happen next? Who knows how many people will have their next phenomenal breakthrough because they knew to be watching. Okay? And that feels like a fairly good place to wrap up, because I don't want to run us over, because this kind of conversation could go on, infinitely. So let me just close this with a little spiritual mind treatment about this. Spirit spoke the word, and the word is made form. There's a great vibration moving right here and right now. And it's moving through each individual uniquely. And yet, we experience it in unity. Tremendous opportunities, planted seeds, things leveraged to the next level where it might not have previously been understood. And I simply say yes. As I recognize one divine creative source that generates all the power that is. Nothing is ever created or destroyed. It is simply in a continuous cycle of transformation according to love as there is only love, and the rest of it is but the movement of life. As I recognize this as the all that is all, I am that I am. I am that love. I am that beauty. I am that joy. I am. What follows your I am right now? What is your volley back to spirit? How high, how far can you take it? What is in your ordinary that is brimming to be extraordinary? All that follows this, I realize in my experience of these individuals and this group collectively that is Unity of East Louisville. And I say, praise the presence, glory, hallelujah. With great gratitude and the heart of a child, I release it, I let it be, and so it is.